Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm so excited to be starting with a new guest, Saul Luckman, today. We are going to talk about the feminine energy and the feminine power and how it's going to be our feminine energy that saves the world. Now, we all know that things are crazy right now. Nobody knows what end is up. Everybody's getting to the point where they don't know what to believe anymore. There's lots of concerns about the jab and do you take it, do you not? Well, Saul has a really great perspective on jack-cines and how they cause autoimmune disease, and better yet, how we can use something called Regenetics that he has worked with for several years to heal the body on an emotional level. You guys are going to just love this conversation. It's going to take lots of twists and turns and go in many different directions. But we're also going to share with you some sources that you guys can reach out to and get involved yourself. But also, I want to have you listen to this episode and just really engage in the power of femininity and the rise between the feminine energy and how that will truly heal the world in its masculine destruction. So I want to give you a little bit of information about Saul himself here. Saul is a longtime researcher of shamanism and spirituality. He is agnostic, psychonaut, devoted to exploring and exposing the truth about human history and the potential wherever that might lead. He has a new novel called Kali the Destroyer, finalist in both the New Age and Visionary categories of 2021's International Book Awards. This is a page-turner of a sci-fi tale set in the Orwellian future, seated in the dystopian presents that radically rewrites Gnosticism as well as the origins of the earth and the humanity. He has many, many different books that he has written, and he has created a unique form of sound healing called Regenetics method. And Luckman has examined the critical role played in DNA and the consciousness in healing, transformation, and evolution. I had the wonderful opportunity to have a conversation with him a few weeks ago, and he and I just really hit it off in our conversations about feminine energy and power of goddesses and this Regenetics method that he used to heal himself from a jack-cine injury, as he calls it. And I want him to be able to share that information with you. So this is going to be a different conversation for us that we've had for a while, but I think you guys are going to really love it. And check him out at the phoenixregenics.org, where he's worked with his partner Lee, and together the two of them have helped many, many victims of heavy metal toxicity, vaccine injury, medical injury of all kinds with this form of sound medicine that he's created. So I can't wait to share this with you guys. Let's dive in right now. Hi, everybody. This episode is brought to you by my very own Phoenix Factor coaching program. Look, we are all trying to create that absolute perfect life. Let me show you how to do that for free in my virtual coaching strategy call. You and I are going to spend 20 minutes chatting about your desires, where you want to take your business life, your health, and of course, your sex life. And then I'm going to give you tips and ideas and techniques on how to actually get that going so you can have that absolutely perfect, amazing life you're looking for. Now, it's super simple. All you need to do is click on my Calendly link here in the podcast notes and hop on, pick your time, and let's start creating that amazing life that you're looking for. All right. So welcome to the show, Saul. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Deborah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow. That's existential questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I come from an academic background, and I was working on a PhD in literature when I had some I like to call them jack-cines because that's what I call them in my book, and I can avoid censorship sometimes that way. So I had some of those for travel, for dissertation research, and I ended up getting really ill because of those. So I have firsthand experience with what it's like to have that kind of damage, and to have my one's life torn apart by that kind of invasive procedure. And I spent a long time trying to get well. I was very ill with an mysterious autoimmune situation that went on for the better part of a decade. And I ended up figuring out how to heal myself using energy and sound healing through a rather miraculous series of events. I detail all of this in one of my books called Potentiate Your DNA. I also talk about it in another book called Conscious Healing. And both of those are on the Regenetics method, which is what I developed with my partner, Lee. And we have a website that's at phoenixregenetics.org. You can check out that whole world of sort of self-empowerment and self-healing and raising your energy level. And I even have an article on my blog called Immunize Yourself Against Vaccine, and I use the other word, injury with this method. So my contention is that it's possible to mitigate some of the effects of these jabs and these mandates energetically, although I don't recommend ever that anyone undergo that process. But if one has to, or if one is forced to under adverse circumstances, there are tools to assist against that kind of onslaught. I just want to put that out there. So that's a good thing.
That's so huge, because I think there's so much right now going around about these jabs, and it is a spiritual fight right now, because people in their innate sense, they know they don't want to do this, but they're being forced to take the jab by whether their employer or a family member, a friend. Their lives are becoming very difficult if they don't get them. Or at least so we're making that in our mind, right? That it's difficult. So how can people use energy to help protect themselves against something like that, against this turmoil that's happening?
Yeah. Well, basically the Regenetics method is a method of sound healing that uses vowels to stimulate what I contend is a self-healing and potentiating potential in the genetics. And what happens, I believe, is that when one experiences this work, is that the by way of the DNA, the cells are flooded with hyperdimensional energy, torsion energy, scalar energy, whatever you want to call it, chi, prana, kundalini, and this forces out a lot of toxins like proteins and that sort of thing. So it's absolutely possible to use energy in conjunction with good diet and perhaps other things, herbs that are out there to help cleanse the body of a lot of different, very difficult toxins. And, if one can get rid of, mercury from the system, which is possible to do, then one can get rid of a lot of things, because that's a very hard thing to detox.
It's very difficult.
It gets stuck in the nerves. And I know that's a big thing that happens with people experiencing Regenetics. They release a lot of heavy metals that shows up in all kinds of tests when people are experiencing this work. It's obviously exiting the body. So I know that it can leave the system. And if you go into Leonard Horowitz's work, who was writing about, the dangers of jack-cines years ago, he wrote a book called Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. And it's related to my work in that way, that it's about using energy and sound to do really amazing feats of healing, even in the face of what he describes as a biological apocalypse related to jack-cines. And so this book was very prophetic about what we're going through right now. And his contention was that even years ago, they were modifying human genetics with these jabs. And the way that would work is you would take diseased animal DNA, insert them into the serum, put it into the human body, and then use reverse transcriptase to have that basically upload into the DNA.
And then we can change generation after generation after generation with that.
Exactly. You can inherit this stuff. So I believe that's what happened to me and why I got so sick. I believe that is the basic explanation for why you have such a generation of chronic fatiguers and fibromyalgia sufferers and that kind of thing. And then what happens is I believe the body gets even more susceptible to becoming toxic through dental amalgams and pesticides and other environmental toxins, because the body actually holds on to those toxins, trying to short circuit the insanity going on with all these pathogens circulating in the system.
It's such an insult to the body. But, I've done this work for 25 years, and you and I had such a great conversation before we hopped on this call even a couple of weeks ago. But I think there's this big part of spirituality and our emotional body that has to heal as well as our physical body. And our healthcare system is only looking at the physical body, not the spiritual human body, that emotional connection. And I have found over the years that when people address that component of it, they make such big strides in healing their body, way more than anything we can give them or do to them.
Oh, you're so right. I mean, even people who are looking at biochemistry in an alternative way, the Bigelsons, right? Okay. So I've seen some wonderful interviews with them on the blood work analysis that they do. And, you would think these guys are all about the physical body, the blood, et cetera. But no, they basically say that 90% of the problems, even things that manifest in an extremely physical way, are emotional and perhaps spiritual.
Yeah. We are spiritually broken and emotionally overwhelmed, I'll say. There's so much trauma that we've brought into our lives. While we're living, we have all this trauma, not to mention all the trauma that we bring with us from our previous lives. And nobody knows how to work with that unless you get into this spiritual realm of things like what you do.
I think you're right. And there are many different ways of approaching healing, or what I like to call it holing, just to emphasize that healing is really a process of empowering ourselves and becoming whole on all of these different levels that are interrelated. And I look at 4 pillars. It's the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual. And that follows a kind of esoteric tradition where you have these subtle bodies that are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. The physical being actually a kind of subtle body. It's all essentially holographic. Even the physical is a vibrating construct that has a spiritual aspect to it. And then you move into the mental, then into the emotional levels, and then ultimately the spiritual levels. And ironically, as you go through that process, rather than getting less and less powerful as the energies become less manifest or less tangible, you actually enter deeper and more powerful creational levels, meaning that much of our experience is created from our spiritual selves, and that it manifests through the emotions and the mental aspects into the so-called physical. So what this means is that where you actually experience the greatest healing is going to the most subtle part of your anatomy, of your spiritual anatomy. Now, one thing I like to talk about, and you may or may not be familiar with this from the work that I do, and this is a concept that a lot of people are not familiar with, but when I was entering this path of energy healing and sound healing, I was doing a version of allergy elimination technique. You're probably familiar with Nambudrapad and Ellen Cutler and that kind of thing. I was being taught by someone who had developed her own technique based on that work. And so I became a practitioner of her work for a while, and I was doing all of this kinesiology on a lot of clients with tons of allergies and fibromyalgia and everything in the world. And I just saw so much evidence of jack-cine damage and heavy metal poisoning and that kind of thing. It was just really overwhelming. And I also saw the many connections with with emotional dysfunction, spiritual crisis, and many, many connections with DNA, genetics, language, sound, all of these. It was just an amazing tapestry of connectivity that I was mapping out doing all of this testing. One of the consistent aspects that emerged from that testing was that the second chakra in people, this is the sex chakra, is this massive problem. It's a problem because it literally is it's like I described it as like a contrail in a jet, or from a jet, that all of this energy is literally leaking out of the second chakra. It's just coming up from the kundalini, if the energy of the earth is coming up through our feet. We're like a plant growing up out of the earth, right? And it goes up through our legs and it hits our first chakra. Everything is cool. And as soon as it tries to get into the second chakra, it just goes away. It just diffuses everywhere. So it never actually comes up into our third and fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh chakras to illuminate and enlighten and empower us the way it's meant to, because we are literally defective in a sense in our second chakra. And this is everybody.